In this video, we're going to cover the challenge exercises from Chapter 11. Hopefully you've had a chance to try the exercises yourself. Again, these are a little bit harder than what you'll see in homework in the exam, but it probably should help you with understanding the material. So let's get into what it is for this chapter. So Anders Painting Service specializes in painting tall office buildings. During a recent month, the company worked on 3 painting projects: the Arrow Building, the Bessler Building, and the Cartwright Building. The company is interested in controlling the materials costs, namely the paint used for these painting contracts. In order to provide management with useful cost control information, the company uses standard costs and prepares monthly variance reports. Analysis reveals that the purchasing agent mistakenly purchased poor quality paint for the Arrow Building project. The Bessler Building project, however, received higher than standard quality paint that was on sale. The Cartwright Building project received standard quality paint. However, the price had increased and a new employee was used to paint the building. Now, this could be a very realistic situation where a lot of things are changing and moving around that are going to be different than what your normal or standard operations are. If you think about some of these, you might be able to predict what some of the variances are going to be that we're going to uncover. So we have shown here at the bottom the quantity and cost data for each project. So we have the actual quantity in gallons, it's gallons of paint used, and the cost of that paint, and then the standard, so based on the project, what we should have used and what it should have cost, and then the total variance. So you see that the Arrow Building was $5,000 unfavorable, the Bessler Building was $23,600 favorable, and the Cartwright Building was $33,000 unfavorable. The net of that for the month is the $14,400 unfavorable. So now what we need to do is first prepare a variance report for the purchasing department. And it's for the purchasing department, so we're going to look at the price variance. So we want a report that shows project, actual gallons purchased, actual price, standard price, then the price variance, and an explanation. After we do that, we're going to prepare the variance report for the production department with the following columns: project, actual gallons, standard price, which will all be used to get us the quantity variance. So the production department is responsible for the quantity variances, and then an explanation. So let's look at that first one first, the price variance report. Okay, there's our columns again. Remember, to calculate the price variance, we take the actual quantity times the actual price minus the actual quantity times the standard price. So we keep the quantity the same, and we're going to use actual, and just vary the price and compare the two. And one we use actual price, the other we use standard price. So when we do that report, it'll look like this. So our actual gallons purchased, the actual price we paid per gallon, the standard price, the price variance, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, and then the explanation. So the Arrow Building, the actual price was less than our standard price, so we have a favorable price variance of $15,000. The explanation is that poor quality paint purchased and it was cheaper. The Bessler Building, we have our 3,800 gallons purchased. $78 is the actual price. $80 is the standard price. The price variance is $7,600 favorable. And the explanation is that they purchased paint on sale. Even though it was higher quality, it was on sale, so they got it at a cheaper price than standard. And then finally, the Cartwright Building, 4,500 gallons purchased. $82 was the price they paid compared to the standard of $80. So we were $9,000 unfavorable in the price variance for Cartwright, and that's because the standard quality purchased, but the price increased. Okay, so they used what they should have used, but it was just a higher price than what they had set as the standard. And then the net of that for the total price variance is 13,600. Next, we'll look at the quantity variance, so another report with similar columns, but now we're going to see the change in gallons between the actual and the standard, using the standard price to get the quantity variance. And again, our quantity variance formula is actual quantity times standard price minus standard quantity at standard price. So we keep the standard price the same and vary the quantity between actual and standard to get our variance. And the report will look like this. So for the aero building, we used 3,750 gallons. We should have used 3,500. $20,000 unfavorable quantity variance. We used more than we should have. And the reason is poor quality paint needed more. The Bessler building, they used 3,800. They should have used 4,000 based on the standard. At the standard price gives us a favorable quantity variance of 16,000, so we used 200 gallons less paint. And the explanation is the high quality paint, they needed less. And finally, the Cartwright building, they used 4,500 gallons. The standard was 4,200, so we used 300 gallons more. At $80 a gallon, it's $24,000 unfavorable. And the explanation is that it's an inexperienced worker and we wasted paint. And then the total is unfavorable, $28,000 for the quantity variance. And again, if you took the sum of the quantity variance and the price variance, would give you the total variance that we saw earlier. Now, in an effort to improve performance, Anders Painting Service found a new supplier that sold average quality paint. The initial cost, quantity and cost data for each project is below. So we have actual gallons used and the actual cost. If we divide the cost by the gallons, we get the cost per gallon. And then the standard quantities and the cost, again, you divide that and you'll get the standard price per gallon or cost per gallon. And we see that we're $9,700 favorable in total for the total variance. Again, we're going to prepare the two reports, the price variance and the quantity variance, and then discuss whether the change to the new supplier is beneficial. So the price variance, again, there's the equation and then the report. We have our actual gallons purchased, the actual price, $78.50 in each case, and the standard is still the $80. So since the actual is less than the standard, we're going to be favorable in each case. So each building project was favorable. The explanation is the same for each. Paint was cheaper than standard cost. So we are $17,700 favorable in our total price variance. If we go to the second part and prepare the quantity variance report, again, our formula here, and in this case, the gallons used versus the standard gallons. So for the aero, 3,650 gallons used instead of 3,500 standard. Bessler was 3,800, standard was 8,000, so a little less. And then again, the Cartwright was 4,350 versus 4,200 standard, so they used a little bit more. And the explanation, so we're 12,000 unfavorable for the aero building, and it was average quality paint needed more. Bessler building, favorable, $16,000. Average quality paint needed less. So in this case, the paint between the two looks like it's mixed. whether they're going to need more or less for each project. And then the Cartwright building, $12,000 unfavorable. Again, inexperienced worker, wasted paint is the explanation. We were $8,000 unfavorable for the total quantity variance. And discussing if it's beneficial. Appears to be. Both the overall price variance and the quantity variance have improved, so our total variance has improved as well. Further investigation would still be required into the quantity variances for the Arrow and Cartwright building projects. So why did you need more for Arrow? If it's average quality, that's what we should have been using anyway. And then with the inexperienced worker, what can we do for training, for example, to see what we can do to not waste paint. So that's what it would look like if you, did the price and quantity variances and kind of put some explanations to those variances to try and change the way you're doing business or to understand what's happening and see if any changes are needed. The second challenge exercise, Paulson's piano service, is trying to establish the standard labor cost of tuning a typical piano. The following data have been collected from time and motion studies conducted over the past 3 months. So we have the actual time spent on tuning a piano. We have the hourly wage rate. We have payroll taxes, setup and downtime, travel and rest periods, and fringe benefits. And those last four all are a percentage of one or the other. They're either a percentage of the labor time or a percentage of the wage rate. We need to determine the standard labor hour per each piano that is tuned. So what is our standard that we're going to set to say we need to complete the tuning in a certain amount of time? We'll determine the standard direct labor hourly rate. So what's the rate for that? And then determine the standard direct labor cost per each piano that is tuned. And then once we get all of that, we can do an analysis that says if we took 1.65 hours to tune a piano at the standard hourly rate, what is the direct labor quantity variance? So we can calculate the labor quantity variance in this case. And then E, we'll come back to that because there's a lot there. We'll see how that is after we answer these other ones. So the first one is determine the direct labor hour per each piano that is tuned. So looking at the data from above, we need to determine which of those lines will be included in calculating the direct labor hour. So it's pretty obvious that the first one, the actual time spent tuning a piano, would be included. But then we need to look at the bottom four and decide which ones should be included in the standard hour versus standard rate or not used at all. Okay, so we have percentages for each, and it kind of helps us here because it tells a percentage of what. So for setup and downtime and travel and rest periods, it's a percentage of actual labor time. So a percentage of time is going to give you time. So those two should be included. The payroll taxes and fringe benefits, those are a percentage of the wage rate. So if you're using the wage rate, you're going to end up with dollars. That would probably make more sense to go into the hourly rate. So for the standard direct labor hour, we're going to take the actual time plus the setup and downtime plus the travel and rest periods to get our standard direct labor. 1.25 hours. Then for the other two, we have a percentage of that 1.25 hours. So we get 1.25 hours plus 0.0625 hours plus 0.1875 hours. Total is 1.5 hours. So the standard time to tune a piano will be 1.5 hours. Now we'll do the same thing but for the labor rate. So we're going to take our hourly wage rate plus payroll taxes plus fringe benefits. That'll give us our hourly rate that we're trying to get. So we have $50 plus 12% of $50 plus 20% of $50. And that's 50 plus 6 plus 10, $66 per hour. That's our standard hourly rate. Again, as we talked about, that's kind of the fully loaded or all-in cost that we might refer to it as that. So it includes the taxes that the employer pays and any fringe benefits that they offer to the employees and the company pays for. So we have our standard direct labor hour, we have our standard direct labor hourly rate. So what is the standard direct labor cost per each piano that is tuned? We calculate that by standard hour times the standard rate. In this case, it's 1.5 hours times $66, so $99 per piano. Now we tuned a piano and it took 1.65 hours. What is the direct labor quantity variance? Again, the quantity variance is the actual quantity at standard price minus the standard quantity at standard price, and that's going to give us our quantity variance. In this case, it's direct labor quantity variance, but the formula is the same whether we're doing materials or direct labor. It's actual at standard and standard at standard. So in this case, we have 1.65 hours at $66 minus the standard of 1.5 hours at $66. So we come up with 108.90 minus the 99 standard is $9.90 unfavorable. Spent more time, so we're going to be unfavorable. Now we'll go to that question E. It says during the month of May, Paulson's piano service tuned 80 pianos. The average time spent on each piano was 1.75 hours. The average cost per hour was $62.25 per hour. Paulson's had to hire someone less experienced part-time in order to help handle the demand. So they had more than the regular people can handle, so they hired a part-time worker that was less experienced. So we're going to calculate the direct labor price variance, the direct labor quantity variance, then the total direct labor variance, and talk about any explanations. So remember, the price variance is actual quantity at actual price minus actual quantity at standard price. So our actual quantity is 1.75 hours. Actual price is $62.25. We're going to multiply those, and then we'll take the same quantity, 1.75, times our standard per hour, 66, which is more than what our actuals were. And then we multiply it by the 80 pianos to get the total. If we just did the hours times the rate, the 1.75 hours times the rate, we would get a variance for each job, but not for the total. So we multiply them by 80 to get the total. So in this case, we're $525 favorable. Since we paid less than our standard, that's why it was favorable. And hiring someone less experienced and part-time is probably what's driving that. The direct labor quantity variance, again, is actual quantity at standard price minus standard quantity at standard price. Again, we're going to take the 1.5 hours for our standard hours at $66 times the 80 pianos. The actual quantity, the 1.75 hours at our standard rate of $66 times the 80 pianos. And we end up with a $1,320 unfavorable variance. So we took a quarter of an hour more for each piano we tuned than what our standard was. And the driver for that is probably that we had to hire someone part-time that was less experienced. The total direct labor variance is going to be one of two ways we can calculate it. We could take our actual quantity times actual price minus our standard quantity at standard price. Okay, remember that from the lecture. If you do that and times 80 on both sides, then you can get the total. Or since we did the price and the labor variances first independently, we can just add those together. So the 1,320 unfavorable and the 525 favorable gives us a $795 unfavorable. So I said add those together, but we're showing subtraction there because one is favorable, one is unfavorable. So if you're doing that, just make sure you get your signs correct on the favorable and unfavorable, so you know that sometimes you're adding them, sometimes you're subtracting them, and which way the result is favorable or unfavorable. I talked a little bit about the explanations, but we'll look at what the official answer is from the book. So the part-time tuner was hired at cheaper labor rate because he or she had less experience. They were not as fast at tuning the pianos. Savings due to the cheaper labor rate did not make up for the extra time spent on tuning the pianos, so the company had an unfavorable overall direct labor variance. So that's it for the challenge exercises. Hopefully you found those helpful. As usual, if you have any questions or need any help, please reach out.